have a pit in my stomach because I have at least one person, very prominent person that I have in my mind, in my life. And I'm like, check, 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 check. Somebody's talking at the table. They're rolling their eyes at other people. Somebody leaves the room. They just immediately trash them as they leave. What I want to know is, we'll get into what to do, but now that you're really kind of pulling apart the signs, and we've learned that there are sort of two tracks in childhood where this behavior and this personality type is made. What is the impact if you have a parent that is like this? Like, if you've been raised by somebody that exhibits all 5 of these, or you're like, oh my God, I think my mom or my dad was a freaking narcissist. Like, check, check, check. How does that impact you now that you're an adult?
So it's not good. That's the best answer I can give you. It is not good. So let's remember 2 things. First of all, I'm going to add a 5B to that list. Look for entitlement. Like that idea of they won't wait in line. They're special. They expect special treatment, and they get really angry if they're not given special treatment. That's another sign to look for. But let's remember this about narcissism. It's on a continuum. Not all narcissists are the same. So a person who is dealing with more of what we call a milder, lighter narcissistic person is having a very different experience than somebody who's dealing with a rather severe narcissistic person. And I think that what that has sort of muddied the waters in this conversation, because if a person dealing with a milder narcissist hears the story of somebody who's dealing with a really severe narcissist, they're saying, well, maybe I'm not dealing with a narcissist because I'm not living in terror. You know, I'm not isolated from all my friends. I still think that person dealing with a lighter narcissist is still feeling unseen, unheard, self-blaming and all of that. It's just at a different level. The reason I bring this up is with the parents, right? I do think that any narcissism in a parent is never good for a child. But at the more severe levels, it's absolutely devastating. What it does is it hijacks a child's sense of self, identity, autonomy. They don't believe in themselves. They believe that their needs are not, in fact, they've been shamed for their needs their entire life. What, you want something from me? You know, like that's what the parent's attitude is. Maybe not that explicitly, but people who grow up with narcissistic parents, the vast majority become rather anxious adults who are not aware of their own self-worth, who have very inaccurate self-appraisal, usually in the wrong direction. They devalue themselves entirely. They don't trust themselves. They downsell themselves. They don't aspire to things that they actually could do because in some ways they've so internalized the way they were shamed by that parent. But above all else, they sort of lose their entire sense of self because their parent never let them develop it, because in essence, the parent really experience the child as an extension of themselves.
What does that mean when the child's the extension of the parent?
So it means that the child should have no needs outside of that parent. So if the child goes along, everyone gets along. If they're, mommy, you're so pretty and we'll do anything you want, and they eat the way the parent wants, and they do the sport the parent wants, and they excel at what the parent wants, and they're just become literally the parent and have no identity or need outside of that, everything's going to be just fine. But that's not how kids work. The whole point of being a child is to individuate and become autonomous. And once that happens, the parent is not interested in that and they don't like it. So the child will always feel that they're almost in psychological servitude to that parent. They're not allowed to have a reality outside of the parent.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about this sort of whiplash, because you know, when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent or spouse or boss, it feels like, I keep reading these comments from our audience about, like, on one hand, you're like, okay, there's the tantrum behavior, but you still feel responsible for them. You still feel guilty when you're mad at them. You still want to please them.
Correct.
Why?
Because there's a guy named Daniel Shaw who writes about this brilliantly, and I want to credit him because I'm going to use his language. He talks about, and I'm going to use a technical term, and I'm going to bring it down to what all of us, how we'd make sense of it. He calls having a narcissistic parent, he calls it a loss of intersubjectivity. That's a real fancy way of saying, it's my reality, it's my way. You're almost like a non-entity here. Everyone exists to serve me. I don't want you to have needs. I don't want you to be something separate. In a healthy parent, the child will be sad, and the parent will sort of, even if the parent's in a good mood, the child will stop and be with their sad child and listen to them and empathize. Whereas a narcissistic parent will say, this is my birthday. What is happening here? Like, wait, get this kid away from me. Like, well, how dare he cry on my birthday? It's that kind of thing, right? So the child is not allowed to have any sort of experience outside of that of the parents. And then the parent really expresses the resentment at the child having needs. Thus, the child internalizes a sense of shame and even guilt over having needs. So when they go into adulthood, that shame and guilt persists. Because that relationship, a lot of therapists don't address it that explicitly. It's not an easy cycle to end, because remember, unlike an adult narcissistic relationship, the child needs the parent. The child needs the parent for safety, for shelter, for food. It's not like you can divorce a parent and say, I'm going to start dating again and see if I can find someone better. That is not how this works. The child knows the parent's the only game in town, and identity is very much shaped by that attachment relationship, by that caregiving parental relationship. So what you're learning is that you're a pain in the neck, don't need so much, you're not good enough, because if you were good enough, that parent would be regulated, that parent would be happy, so you're doing something wrong. And the narcissistic parent explicitly and implicitly communicates that to them. I wish you'd never been born. You're so much trouble. I would have had such an amazing career if it weren't for you. Child shouldn't be hearing that. They'll shame a child's weight, like, oh, goodness, if somebody's eating too much, it's because you're a bad reflection on the parent. If you don't look the way the parent wants, you're not doing what the parent wants. Oh, my kid, he wants to play a violin. He won't even play sports. All of those things are, the child is supposed to be a functionary for the parent. And so as that person goes into adulthood, I would actually say it's almost a 3-part whiplash. There is the sense of, you know what the tantrum is. You see it coming. Mm-hmm. You then have the experience of, is this my fault? I need to calm them down. I feel bad. And then you have the third experience that you may still have some good moments with that parent. Yes. That parent may be really smart, really interesting, really fun. I mean, in fact, a lot of people say, as I got older, there were parts of my parent I enjoyed because I'd noticed there was something fun, but I still felt the shaming and the blaming. And it's very interesting for a lot of narcissistic parents. They like babies because babies are sort of like an accessory, like a bag. You can kind of take them around, like, and show them around town. Once they stop being baggable and carryable, not so interested anymore, not so cute on social media, then there's this huge, long period where that child needs more than it can give back. Then the child gets into late adolescent and early adulthood. The parent's interested again. They can go out to dinner with them. They can go to a bar with them. They can go on an interesting vacation with them. They can bring them into the family business. And so now they're interested in their kid. And for some kids who desperately wanted that love, they go all in on that. They're like, right. I'm going to play tennis with my dad, or I'm going to help my mom in her business, because now I'm going to get that love, the love you wanted when you were 4 and you couldn't quite work in the family business. So now that trauma, and that's where we get to this idea of the trauma bond.
Okay, let's talk about this, because I know that what's happening as you're listening to this is you're probably going, ding, 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 ding. And we're focusing on parents right now, but we are going to get into romantic relationships. But I think it's an important distinction that with the parent-child relationship, you are there. Like, you don't have an option.
You don't have an option.
So what do you do now? If you're sitting there listening to this and you're going, oh my God, that's me. And I do keep jumping back into the fire. Mm-hmm. It's like this, are they super hostile? Or, are they loving me? Did I get it right and now I'm getting affection? Or are they trying to annihilate me because they're not getting what they need from me and I'm not behaving? So right. as an adult now, if you're going, this is me, what do you do?
So a couple things. All right. Number one, I am not going to sugarcoat this and say there's like 3 easy steps to pushing back from a narcissistic parent. This ain't TikTok, folks. Like, this is hard work. Okay? There is no 3-step, 5-step, 10-step, or even 172-step plan here.
Okay. I'm going to take a deep breath because I need every one of you to hear, this is not TikTok.
Okay.
No. You need to wake up and realize that, first of all, you're not changing the weather in Chicago. Mm-mm. And you're not going to change the personality type if your parent is a narcissist or you are in love with one. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. So number one, is the acknowledgement. And this is the hardest part of all. Although you're this person's child, narcissistic people view all the people around them as objects. Like my coffee maker or my tea maker. This morning I made a cup of tea. I don't think about my tea maker unless I want a cup of tea. When I want a cup of tea, me and my tea maker interact. The rest of the day, don't think about it once.
At all?
At all. Why would I? I don't need a cup of tea, right? And that's how a narcissistic person thinks about other people. Do I need something from you? Yeah. Do I need something from you? Oh yeah, I do need something from you. Now you're my central focus. I'm thinking about only you. But just like if that tea maker waddled over to me and said, hey, could you listen to me? I'd be like, what? You're a tea maker. Like, go away. This is not Beauty and the Beast. Appliances do not talk. Get the hell away from me. You are a tea maker. Learn your place. So for a narcissistic person, we all serve a function for them. Whether it's their lover, whether you're their accountant, whether you're their cleaner. That's why narcissistic people always have like a team around them. It's always about the team. I'm like, of course you have a team around you because everyone serves a function for you.
I'm trying to pick my mouth up off the floor because this is a revolutionary idea for me. That a narcissistic person isn't ever thinking about you unless they need something for you.
Exactly.
And yet, if you have ever been in a serious relationship with a narcissist or you were raised by one, you think about them all the time.
All the time. All that you're ruminating them. They're not thinking about you unless they need something from you or you're a blockade to something they need, right? Like you're not signing the deal or because you're sick, they can't go to something. Now they're thinking about you because they're mad at you, right? But it's going back to your parents.
I'm like,
going back to that parenting issue. So as you get into adulthood, you are an object to them. So like, what can I do? What can I this? You're never going to be able to read their mind and give them everything they want. You will never be able to. None of us are mind readers. You're never going to be able to fully anticipate. And what's so sad is people who are all in with narcissistic parents or even narcissistic partners will literally try to devote their lives to anticipating the narcissistic person's every need so they can finally win them over, that they could do it just right. So that's not possible because none of us are mind readers. Remember that?
so what do you do?
You give up. You at that point, you're like, okay, I can only be the best person I can be. Live in a way that's in line with your own values, right? Now, this is why I'm saying that this is not an easy TikTok strategy. Because even as you do that, even when the day comes, you realize my parent's never going to end, but my parent is never going to change. None of this is my fault. It's really just my genetic bad luck that this is the parent I pulled.
Yeah.
Again, I am not responsible for any of this. I need to stop taking my bucket to an empty well. They are never going to notice me. They are never going to have empathy for me. I cannot live my life as a sacrifice to them and forever keep trying to please them and not living my own true, authentic path. All of those things are important. Here's the part that I'm saying is never, this is just the work, and then when you tell your parent, no, I'm not coming to dinner this Sunday. I'm not. I didn't feel good last month. I'm taking a pass. Really? You're not coming? I was making that special thing and I really miss you and I'm thinking of you. And you know, I'm getting older. 90% of people are going to break under that one and they're going to show up and guess what's going to happen at that dinner again? The criticism, the humiliation, the devaluation, the invalidation, right? So I say to people, you got two options here. Either be with the guilt of saying no, or go to the dinner with realistic expectations. That when you, and almost make it a game, like a personal bingo. You know, it's not quite a drinking game because if you took a shot every time they invalidated you, you'd be loaded before the main course came. But if you, I literally have done this where I'm like, okay, I'm going to collect points at this dinner. For every 5 invalidations, I'm going to go like, I'm going to get a scoop of ice cream. And then it's like a little thing that pays out during the week. Like Tuesday, I'm going to get ice cream. And on Thursday, I might get a massage. Like 15 invalidations is usually a massage for me.
And so I'm like, keeps you objective.
Yeah.
Too.
And I'm like, I'm gone in. I'm like, do it again. We're 13. I really want the massage.
So let me ask you this question. So should you ever confront a narcissist? Like somebody's going to come listen to this podcast and be like, all right, that's it. I'm calling dad.
Nope. I can't. If we only said one thing in this entire podcast episode is never, ever call out a narcissist. We would be giving the single most brilliant piece of advice.
Why do you never call out a narcissist?
I'm going to temper that with, it depends on what you want. If you're doing this because you want to say, it's like a gotcha moment, haha, I see you. Okay. And they're going to rage at you and they're going to scream at you. And there might be a smear campaign now. And they may be telling everybody out there that not only you are an ungrateful kid, but you are the narcissist and you're the one who's harmful. And everybody needs to keep their distance from you. And I mean, they will really do such a number on you that, and they're not going to change. So if all it is for you to say, I see you, I think the better way to play that is you see them, now change your behavior. Stop being supply for them. Stop engaging with them. Stop taking the bait.
So are you saying if you call home and the first thing out of somebody's mouth is, haven't heard from you in a long time, you should not say, the phone works both ways?
No way. No, if you know this person's narcissistic, absolutely not. So they say, haven't heard from you in a long time. And you'd say, no, you haven't.
Oh.
And then where are they going to go with that? Because what you've done is you've taken away the volley. They're playing tennis. You need to play solitaire.
Can you give us some other role plays?
So put another conversation starter out there for me.
Why don't you come to Thanksgiving?
And the assumption in this one is, why don't you come to Thanksgiving? Is this person's committed fully to not going this year?
You got to come to me.
Okay, so you go. This is where, and I'm going to step back before I role play that. I'm going to introduce the concept of True North. Okay, True North.
Okay,
True North is a big healing, what we call healing technique for folks, or at least it's more of a management technique than healing, I should say. True North is that you need to figure out what in your life is worth fighting for. So maybe you're not going to Thanksgiving this year, not only because you don't want to see them, but it's your kids playing football that day. All right, and you do not want to miss that football game, or you do actually have a big deadline at work the Monday after Thanksgiving and you want to get it done. Or you said, tack with it, this is the year we're actually going to go camping, or we're going to go to Hawaii for Thanksgiving. Okay. Yep. Because that's what my family has always wanted to do. Your friends, you've decided to take a trip with your friends. Your true north is what is healthy for you. Okay. So you've got to be clear on that.
It sounds like it's a balance between how much guilt can you tolerate. Right?
Kind of. It is and it isn't, because the guilt is, people feel guilt. People feel guilt when they believe they're doing something wrong. Oh. So to which I'd say, what did you do wrong? You feel guilt if you committed a crime. You feel guilt if you stole something. You feel guilt if you cheated on someone. So when my clients tell me all the time I feel guilty, I'm like, tell me what you did wrong. And that's when I get the pause. They're like, I don't want to go to Thanksgiving. I'm like, I'm sorry. So help me understand where that's wrong. Well, that's what they want. I'm like, I hear that, but how is that wrong? Because the axiom to that is not doing what they want is wrong.
Okay. Everybody, did you hear that? This is a huge takeaway. So if the lights are going off in your head and you're starting to go, wait a minute, I definitely either had a parent that had some narcissistic personality, or I'm in a relationship with somebody like this. The reason why you feel guilty is because if you don't do what they say, that's wrong.
Correct. That's exactly.
That's what you were trained to believe.
You were trained to believe that is. And if you had a parent like that, and let's say this is even happening in your committed relationship or your marriage, then that's another time when you're almost indoctrinated into believing not doing what another person wants is wrong. And I like make the argument about it for me.
This is foundational. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is the tantrum throwing.
Yes.
The shaming, the gas. Mm-hmm. I didn't say that. Like all the adolescent tantrum behavior.
Adolescent, toddler.
Yeah, is what actually has trained you to believe that not doing something that person wants is wrong. That's why you feel guilty.
That's why you feel guilty.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. How the hell do you get rid of that programming?
Well, first of all, is one of the only paths forward to healing is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
I don't like that answer.
And I know people don't like that answer. And I'll tell you why. Everyone goes to the damn gym and they lift the weights and they do this and they're crossfitting that and they're in pain because they want a hot ass or they want abs or they want arms and they want to look good. Why are you willing to tolerate pain there and you're not willing to tolerate pain here? Pain's pain, folks.
So if you listen to the first episode, or you already know that you grew up in a household with a narcissistic parent, what are the few things that you need to do for your own healing so that you can be open to and interested in somebody who's healthy
for you.
even though you've never been with somebody who is?
Number one is being willing to see it clearly. This is a painful, like it's that painful awareness of, oh my gosh, my parent is narcissistic. My parent is antagonistic. I have a parent who has no empathy, because it almost is like leaning into this sort of, a lot of people say who had narcissistic parents said, I felt a certain shame about my childhood. Like I knew something wasn't quite right here, but I didn't know what it was. No kid wants to be the odd kid out, right? Nobody wants to be the kid who has the fighting parents or something's not quite right in their home. And I think with people who grew up in those kinds of homes, it was sort of like fake, like to the world, like maybe your friends would come over and your parent would actually be really charming. But then when everyone was out of the house, your parent was a rager. That kind of inconsistency really would leave people feeling like, what is wrong with me? So it really becomes it is about therapy or doing the deep dive of being willing to sort of look at these patterns with a very open eye, no matter how painful it is, that just because you came from a narcissistic family system, it doesn't mean you're damaged. It's not an indictment of you, which unfortunately a lot of people feel. And then to really take a good hard look at, where has this hijacked you? Where has this robbed you of your autonomy, of your identity, of who you are? Like, do the hard work. Some of that can even be done, if not just through therapy, through journaling, just being aware of where that happened, how you talk to yourself, how you apologize for things you didn't even do wrong, how you're constantly putting yourself down, self-gaslighting yourself, like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about, don't listen to me. How many people do that reflexively? That's a throwback to that childhood. It's about getting your house in order before you start going out there and basically replicating those cycles. Unfortunately, that's not what people are taught to do. And a lot of people in their early 20s don't have the time, the volition, or the money to go into therapy.
Yeah. Are there personality types that are more prone to like having a narcissist come into their lives?
Well, I think that there's definitely a person who comes from a narcissistic childhood. There's a vulnerability there. Listen, I'm going to say this, Mel, to make this almost as an easy question to answer. Everyone is. There's not a person out there who's not. And I'll tell you why. Because at first blush, narcissistic people are charming, charismatic, curious, confident. They comforting even. They feel like they can take care of things. So if these people were coming in on date one screaming at you and cursing at you, probably not going to be a date two. There's a whole phenomenon of love bombing.
Well, okay, we'll get to love bombing in a minute, but how the hell are you supposed to spot one then if you're dating?
Because this is where the trauma bond becomes a problem. So what the trauma bond results in, not just that alternation between good and bad, but you justify the bad days. Right? So, oh, dad just had a bad day at work. Mommy's just really tired. We're all pushing her to, and then you internalize that blame. Daddy had a bad day at work. I have to be good. You know, mom's just really tired. I have to help. So like they're trying to, but you justify. Think of everyone in a narcissistic relationship. He had a tough childhood, has a competitive job. The deals haven't been coming through the way they want. They just want what's best for us. I mean, the justifications go on forever, but the justifications keep the toxic dynamic in place. And that's another core pillar of that trauma bond, right? So justify. And so everyone's vulnerable. Because you meet someone and you're attracted to them and they are charming and interesting or whatever it is that appeals to you about them. And they stay that way 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months sometimes. Now you're falling in love with this person. Now the stuff starts to gurgle up, those proverbial red flags.
And what are the proverbial red flags when you're dating?
Okay, the red flags might be things like getting snappy when you give them a little bit of feedback, being really entitled when you go to a restaurant with them.
So watch how they treat waiters.
Watch how they treat waiters. Watch how they treat anyone. How they talk about other people. Contemptuous dismissal. How do they get along with your friends? It may be that one of your friends, the one friend that might have called them out on someone, might be the one friend they say, you know, I don't think that friend's good for you, kind of thing. So those things will pop up. But here's the thing, Mel, I was talking with someone recently on my own podcast, and in her situation, she didn't have 6 years of marriage, not one red flag. I'm going to make people listen to my podcast to hear what happened when the red flags came piling in. But there's someone 6 years. She's like, I am being honest with you. And people who knew me would say the same thing. There was no red flags. So everyone, I'm saying this for one reason.
Why? Like, why? How, like,
a lot of people blame themselves. They'll say, that one day, whether it's 1 year in, 2 years in, or 10 years in, the narcissism shows up. There must have been red flags. I didn't see them. I must be an idiot. This is my fault. This is my fault for not seeing the red flags. And I really want to tell everyone, while some of them may be out there, some of them may be humming at such a low level that you're not noticing them, or they're so reminiscent of what you grew up with. They're like, oh my God, this is nothing compared to my mother, kind of thing. But in the vast majority of cases, the red flags were there. And it's a combination of either people didn't know they were red flags, people justified them, or people blamed themselves immediately. Like, I shouldn't have criticized their sweater, even though it wasn't a criticism, they quickly justify. But everyone is vulnerable. Now, are some people more vulnerable? Certainly. People who grew up with a narcissistic parent or parents, they're vulnerable. People with histories of trauma who already are might be that can often result in self-devaluation and other phenomena that would lead a person less likely to call out the red flags. People who, this is going to be a surprising one, people who come from very happy families with 2 loving parents and just happy, those folks are vulnerable because they can't even believe this exists. So when there's a red flag, they'll often think like, well, we just loved each other through this stuff. There ain't no loving anyone through a red flag. So they might turn to that. There are people who are going through periods of transition. So like on the rebound, people will sometimes meet narcissistic people. When a person moves to a new city, has moved to a new job, has experienced a major loss, these are people who are already more vulnerable. And the idea that someone new is coming into your life, especially, let's say, new city. Ooh, wow, this is great. I'm meeting someone. And you kind of go into the rom-com mindset rather than like, this is moving a little bit quickly, that kind of thing. People who are in a rush are vulnerable. People like, my biological clock is ticking, all my friends are getting married, that kind of thing. Those are folks who may be vulnerable, saying, okay, I'm just going to have to settle here because I really want to be a parent, and this is who's in front of me right now. And I can't tell you how many people have gotten roped in narcissistic relationships because they felt a time clock ticking around marriage, around settling down, around having a child. They really felt like if I don't do this, I don't want to end up like my friend who ended up never meeting anyone and regrets that. I tell you, one thing they regret, probably don't regret, that person. Is exactly. And so all of these kinds of other sorts of vulnerability factors that a person can bring in can increase the vulnerability beyond what we all have. And I think that idea that all of us, that somebody's not vulnerable, I mean, again, the unicorns out there are the people who really, really like almost see it right away. Listen, I do this. This is what I do. I'm still played. People still come into my life. I'm getting better at it. But to get better at it, Mel, I almost had to become, I feel at times there's a part of me that's become kind of closed off.
So is there 1 or 2 red flags that for you are just non-negotiable? Like the second you see that one, you are like, nope. Because when you talk about being closed off, because you are extremely warm and extremely smart and extremely generous. And so I'm just wondering, because I think that what's scary about hearing all this is that by the time you kind of wake up and you're 3 months into something or 3 years into something, and all the bonds are there and the lease is signed and you're married or you have kids or now you've moved in together, or now you're like got all the chemicals flooding your body because you're falling in love, and you start to hear these red flags. I never would have had the strength, I think, when I think like, don't. You know what I mean? To be like, oh, okay, time to end this.
No. Most people don't. And that's, again, it's important for people to hear that because a lot of people feel foolish. Why didn't I hear the red flags? I knew it on my wedding day. I knew it. I felt it. Because when we, again, these stories are so easy to tell backwards. But at that point, it would have felt cataclysmic. And in a way, this was the only way you were going to truly get the lesson. It's unfortunate. And the issue then becomes like, when I meet somebody who's a little bit too charming, a little bit too charismatic, I shut down. I'm like, why? What is this? And people are saying, you're the only person I've ever met who walks away from charismatic people. Literally. I've been at gatherings and a person's just that person, and I people must think I have some sort of bowel disorder, because I'm like, I have to run to the restroom. The number of times at a social event I'll say I have to run to the restroom, people are like, what did she eat?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I recently had a couple things go down, both in business and life, that were just shocking betrayals, lies, stolen from, all that kind of stuff that just knocked me over. And when I look back through my life, there is a very pronounced pattern of me being drawn like a moth to the flame to very charismatic, funny, kind of rebel-y people. And I get sucked right in. And then I realize once I'm like kind of in the inner circle, oh my God, this person's unpredictable. This person like trashes people that leave the room. This person has major mood swings. And then I literally go into a mode of just twisting myself in knots to not upset the person.
Correct. That's actually a trauma response.
Yeah.
Twisting yourself into knots to not upset the person, or even like, like, oh, you're so great, like the fawning response. These are classic trauma responses.
And it took a couple really painful experiences back to back to have me look backwards. It was almost like life hit me with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is too. You and I both worked in the media, and you in a much more profound way than me. But I have to say, over the many years I've done this, what I've always seen was the charming, charismatic, grandiose people never, ever, ever followed through on their promises, and sometimes almost to my very real financial harm and all of that. And I thought, and that happened in academia, that happened in other areas of my life. And so I think for me, those things have become correlated in my mind. Big talker, big promise, big, all that big talk, it never comes to fruition. And I got hurt by this. So when we talk about classical conditioning, it's like Pavlov's dogs, right? The salivating dog when they heard the bell. For me, it's charm and charisma means you're about to either betray me, or you're just full of BS. And so that a lot of harm had to come to me to learn that lesson. And when I connected the dots to my own childhood and my own experiences, I could see how I got played. And like I said, now it comes off as a little bit closed off. I wouldn't be surprised if people would think that about me. And I do think that this is, though, in order for all of us to become more narcissist resistant, we need people around us that will back us up. And where I'm really blessed, at least professionally, is a team that calls BS. They'll read emails like, nah, no, yes, no, yes. And then I'll go deeper in. And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, sure. And they'll say, listen, it's your gig. You call that one, but we don't love this.
Right.
And so did I hear that right? In fact, the other night I had an experience that was really uncomfortable. And I was like, was that uncomfortable? And I remember my team like, that sucked. And I was like, oh, and it was so that if you have the people around you who are actually able to be authentic and call out BS, that's also another way you become more resistant to this nonsense. Versus
it's almost like having siblings that bond together, like
healthy siblings.
Yes, healthy siblings.
Not siblings that throw you under the bus.
Right.
And I think that because the problem is a lot of people are surrounded by enablers. Oh, come on. He kind of seems like a nice guy and he's cute and he's from the same place and you're... I'm like, he's invalidating you. I don't care how... Nobody's that cute.
I'm sorry. As a mom, now I'm like, thinking about my daughters. But so what is love bombing?
So love bombing is it's where the charm and charisma turn into behavior. It's the early phase of any narcissistic relationship. We tend to only use this term for romantic relationships. It can happen in friendships, workplace, you name it, anywhere. It is this intense and overwhelming, I'm going to call it a courtship, where a person it's almost an obsessive fascination with you. Is a person trying to win you over. The classical kind of tropey love bombing is, on your first date, you go to the best restaurant in town. Then they get the concert tickets no one can get. And on your third date, you fly to Paris and you dance till 6 a.m. on the beach. And it's so exciting. And they make a scavenger hunt for you and they get you gifts. And every Friday, there's a dozen roses waiting for you. That's love bombing. It's fairy tale. It's larger than life. But I think if we only use that trope, it's tricky.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
it's too
who
simple.
can afford to do that? I'm like, that's
well,
like how do you do that on a blue collar budget?
I'll tell you how.
Tell me how.
You take people to whatever is considered the best restaurant in, to your budget. Like the person's still going to think that's great. They'll say, let's go on a drive to wherever the cool place to go on the drive is. I'm going to show you the coolest view you've ever seen in your life. They'll buy things. It might not be.
It's like the whisk you off your feet. I'm proving to you.
The good night, princess. Good morning. I can't start my day without thinking about you. And then there'll be subtle things like take a picture where you're at. I just want to see where you're at. To me, that's this person stalking you. Why do they need to know where you're at? Of course, I am the anti-romance. Do not find me on Valentine's
of those
Day.
Is fine. Not like, but not on the second date. Okay.
Right. But it's a lot of that. It's intense contact. But love bombing just doesn't look like that. Love bombing may become really intense, almost oversharing really early in the game. Like they're laying out like this really deep, profound, true or untrue story about their past, about their childhood, about what they're feeling. And for some people, that's the play because they'll say, oh my gosh, this person's sharing so much. They're so vulnerable. And now you're kind of in because they've shared so much. Love bombing can be too much time together. Our first date lasted 2 weeks. Like, do you even have a job? Like, what kind of first date lasts 2 weeks? So, like, when people say that stuff are like, I knew right away. I was like, trauma bond. Like the minute people say that, I know that sounds so cold, but it's actually not. It is this sort of, people might say like when I first saw them, like I was really attracted to them, but not like I knew right away. But the 2-week first date, there's this intense intention. They spend so much time together. I canceled all my plans to be with them. It was so, their lease came up and we'd only been together a month, but we decided to move in together. Fast. The fastness is also a part of love bombing. It's an intensity. It's what I call an intense indoctrination into another person. They are winning you over. When you're being love bombed, you're so distracted by the sharing, by the obsession, by the texting, by the emails, by the gifts, by the quickness that you're not noticing the red flags.
So what do you do if you're a friend? Because I think oftentimes, if you see this happening to a friend or you as the friend on the outside start to have the red flags go up and you say something to your friend, maybe you guys should take it a little easier. Or, I hear he wasn't that great with his last girlfriend. Or like you just tried, like, how do you approach it if you're the friend?
Don't drop a dime on the other person. Because the minute you try
what do you mean,
to
drop a dime?
Meanings like, I heard they weren't great with their other person. He's moving real fast. It's something we learned from doing treatment with substance users is do not make them defend their behavior and don't make him defend the narcissist. The minute you say he wasn't great with his former partner. Yeah. Have you ever met his former partner? And now they're defending them. Never do that. You got to find the back door.
So how do you find the back door with a loved one?
You say, how are you talk to me about your new relationship? How are you feeling? How are you doing? And they'll tell you the story. Wow, that's a lot happening. How do you feel about that? You might be more likely for them to say, yeah, it is a lot. Like I'm trying to go with it because I've always thought like I don't deserve a fairy tale. Now I'm getting the fairy tale and say, what feels fairy tale-ish about that to you? You're trying to get them to talk without getting them to defend the narcissistic person. Listen, I'm basically trying right now to train people to use therapy tricks here. Right? But that's really what it is because I think we're so quick to say, I don't like him. The first thing they're going to do is defend him. You've got to get them to talk about the relationship so they start spilling on like, oh, I don't know about this. What do you mean you don't know about this? And let them talk and say, well, if you're feeling like that, do you think there's, do you feel okay? Maybe, I don't know, like take a step back. Like you can do that because it sounds like this person cares about you so much. And I mean, that's a little manipulative, but if you're trying to save someone, you try all the tricks. But what you're trying to do is give them permission maybe to slow down, to pull back, or like saying, he wants to move in right away and say, you love having your own place. So how do you feel about that? Get them to talk about the thing that they value, which is the having their own place, versus what kind of fool wants to move into your apartment in a month?
Right. Right. I got it. That's very, very clear. So if you're spotting this, just get them to talk. Open-ended questions. Do not say anything that makes them defend. So interesting. I can look backwards now and see as a parent several mistakes that I made.
Because as parents too, Mel, we're so quick in there to want to protect our kids. I think nowhere else do we see that reactive, like bad, bad, bad. And it's it's almost like you can feel the clenching in yourself of saying, well, talk to me about this friendship. And inside you're like, leave them. I hope you never talk to them again. Rah, rah, rah. But you can't, because everybody, when they're ambivalent about something and we raise the thing that they're ambivalent about as being bad, their reactive response is to defend that thing because they're ambivalent.
It makes a lot of sense. It seems like you can't talk about narcissism, particularly in the dating world, without the term gaslighting coming up. Can you explain what gaslighting is?
Right. So gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse. It's a form of manipulation, but it is a doubting of reality followed up with a making someone feel impaired. And so it's not just lying, right? It's not like, I didn't move the checkbook. That's a lie. Okay, they did move the checkbook. It's not, that never happened. That's a lie. It did. All right. So that up to the first part of gaslighting is lying. It's the second part of it that makes it gaslighting, which is you say, we'll use a simple example. Did you move the checkbook? I always keep it in this drawer. Like, no, I didn't move the checkbook. Are you sure you didn't move the checkbook? It's always in this drawer. You know what? Your memory has been going lately. This isn't the first time. And, you've been so distracted and stressed. In fact, it's affecting our relationship. Like, have you thought about talking to someone? Now it's become a conversation about how you have memory problems and are distracted and stressed out of your mind, but they actually did move the checkbook.
I had this situation, I can't really go into it in great detail, but dealing with a narcissist and a work relationship where I knew something was up. I would say blah, blah, blah about the issue, and they would lie. And then they would point it back, but you've been so busy.
Correct.
I handled it.
Correct. Bingo.
Over and over. And then the closer I got to the truth, the more I noticed this rage, like this. It's in the narcissists that I now see that I have dealt with, whether it's in work or in life or relationships or friendships. There's always this moment that I call that, in the Bravo Real Housewives of New Jersey, that famous clip where that woman flips over the table.
Yes. And I don't even watch it, and
rage.
I know that. Yeah, it's rage. Yeah, that's a great narcissistic moment.
So narcissistic rage is a thing?
Oh, it's absolutely a thing. It is because it's a rage that's set off by their thin-skinned reactive sensitivity. Right? Something that does not require a table being flipped over. I don't know that anything anyone could say to you would be a table being flipped over. Right? I mean, short of like, I don't know, I killed your best friend. I suppose I might flip a table over at that point. But short of that, no table flipping. And these very dramatic, dysregulated gestures. And afterwards, they'll soft pedal it or downplay it, or give you a pseudo apology and then just do it again.
Yeah. Wow. Are there other forms of gaslighting that might surprise us? There's that sort of like lying and then flipping it back on you. But are there other forms of gaslighting that surprise people?
In some ways, there's other things that are gaslighty, like the silent treatment in a way can have a gaslighty feel, because you start feeling like you're losing your mind, So that's a great example of sort of a gaslighty behavior. At some level, denial can have a gaslighty feel. I mean, again, gaslighting in its purest form is the denial of reality and then telling you there's something wrong with you, right? So that's the sequence of it. But it is but it can take these other kinds of, these other sorts of, like, can't you take a joke is a great example of gaslighting.
You're too sensitive.
Yeah, you're too sensitive. Can't you take a joke is a great example of they insult you, all right? You have a reaction to that. Like, That was not okay. That was in front of a group of people. What were you thinking?
I didn't mean it that way.
I didn't mean, can't you take a joke? So now you're this sort of hypersensitized, hyper-reactive person who can't take something that was allegedly a joke, even though the tone or anything. Can't you take a joke? And again, I mean, I think comics do this all the time. I mean, I don't know, being a comedian relationship is probably a tough, because they're probably, everything's a joke, right? So, but it's that's another great example of something you don't realize. It's a gaslighting.
Okay, so now we are at the point of the podcast where I feel like we have popped the popcorn and everybody listening is going, oh God, they're like, I'm spotting narcissists everywhere. So let's start to talk about, what do you do? Right. What do you do? And let's start with the example of, how do you break up with a narcissist?
Not every narcissistic relationship ends. Keep this in mind. I think that...
Should it?
Listen, if I ran the world, sure, but I don't run the world. And I also know that for some people, they're saying, you know what? I'm not going to divorce my parent. There's reasons of culture, reasons of other people in my family that matter to me, my own sense of duty and obligation and responsibility. I see them clearly now, though, and I'm going to interact with them differently, but I'm not going to end all contact with them. Okay. There are many people, I'd say 50% of people in narcissistic marriages stay, in long-term committed relationships stay. And I understand that. And I don't think that there should be a pressure to go, because when there's that pressure to go, what I see is a lost opportunity to help that person heal and grow, even while they stay in it.
So by the person heal and grow, you're talking about the person who's in the relationship. Yes. Because as we learned in the very beginning, you can't change the weather in Chicago, and you cannot change.
We're not changing the narcissist. That's not even on the table.
Well, and it's important for everybody to hear this, because you are listening to the world's leading expert on this, who has had a clinical practice, who has been an academic, who is sought after by everybody on this topic. You have been in clinical settings treating narcissists who have come in looking for help because it now serves them, because the board of directors is now getting ready to fire them, or their spouse is ready to divorce them,
or they genuinely feel that everyone's out to get them. I mean, remember, narcissistic people are very victimized. If things aren't going their way, everyone's out to get me. I have a target on my back. Witch hunt, that kind of thing. How come everyone's out to get me? How come life's so unfair to me?
Yep. And if you are in a clinical setting and you are working with a narcissist who is self-motivated to try to change, how much can they change?
It's a great question. So I've worked with many clients like this. You're going to get the best we can hope for is a little bit more accountability. They'll still have rage, but they might catch it and apologize a little bit more. They are still going to roll their eyes when they don't want to listen to someone, but they'll maybe do it less. They'll huff and puff when they're made to wait in the line at the airport, but they won't scream at the gate agent. They can sprint through some stuff. You can get them to sprint through some stuff, but they're never going to be marathoners. They're still going to drop the ball a lot. I've worked with people who, once they learned what it meant to stop being this way, which meant empathy, listening to people, being present, holding space for them, being accountable for their bad behavior, not getting angry at people or sharing their feelings. I had one person say to me, "This is what this is about." And I said, yeah. So he said, I want to break in therapy for a little while. And in that period of time, he divorced his wife and broke up with his mistress. And I said, oh, and he's like, you know what? And he said, I don't want to hurt these people. I really don't want to hurt people, but I can see they're getting hurt. And you've clearly pointed that out in here, that I am hurting them. Because I would say how do you think they felt? We did a lot of what's called mentalization work, forcing the person to think about, how do you think that other person feels? And in a therapy room, if they scream at me, I'd be like, bye, out. You're not my client anymore. So he said, I don't want to hurt them, but I don't want to listen to them. I'm not interested in their BS. I'm not interested in their feelings. Like, I could do it for 10 minutes, but this hours thing, no. I want to live in my own place, and I miss sex. So I found someone, and I pay her every 2 weeks, and she comes by, and I don't want her to wake up next to me. And
sounds like a real peach.
Okay. But you know what? I'd say kind of a peach. I wasn't mad at him. his ex-wife can now go and find, is no longer chased. She may still wonder,
So
why
what
is I
if
not
you
enough?
do if you're the ex-wife? Because I think one of the other things that I've learned from you is that the damage that a narcissist does.
She's got to go do her work now. I mean,
And
she's
what
got-
is that
yeah.
work?
That work is learning about narcissism, understanding you're not to blame. It's almost like a person is going to be less frustrated about their car breaking down if they know how their car works. Right? So now you're
Yep.
like, oh, this mechanic's taking advantage of me. I'm like, nah, now you know how to change your own carburetor. Like, I'm teaching you how to fix this thing.
Got
okay? And the fix is not in them, it's in you.
Because remember, you ain't changing the weather in
You're
Chicago.
not changing weather in Chicago. And
ultimately, the person that you treated that would do these very intense visualization exercises to try to understand empathy, the only thing that happened is that he gained the knowledge to go, I'm not doing that.
And here's the thing, though, that to me is a form of empathy, because I'll tell you this. Instead of saying, well, she needs to step up, she needs to meet me where I'm at. He's like, I don't want to hurt these people. And I am going to keep hurting them, because if you think I'm going to sit here and listen to their BS feelings without rolling my eyes, you're high.
So, Dr. Ramani, you have really helped me, because there were kind of some major takeaways that I've learned from you. One being that you don't change the weather in Chicago. You're not changing the behavior of a narcissist or the brain of one, period. Second, that narcissists are made during childhood. They're not necessarily born that way.
They're not. They're definitely not born that way.
The third thing is that if it's truly somebody with a narcissistic personality, they don't even know they're doing it. It's not like it is a conscious behavior. No. It is so ingrained in how they behave that it's like a reaction to situations.
Correct. But this is an important flip I need to make on that, because people say, well, if they don't know, then I can't be mad at them. To which I say, yes, you can.
I have a question for you. So like, how does one turn off that voice that's, been programmed into our head, telling us that, our needs, our emotions don't matter and we must cater to theirs? So like, how do you turn that off?
Okay, it's an excellent question. And you don't turn it off. You have to lay a new soundtrack. So if you think about the default mindset, almost like a playlist that runs in the background, that it's almost hard to make it go silent. It's much easier to put a new playlist in there.
Right.
And so there are two things two tricks I'm going to give you. So number one, well, before I get into the tricks, I just want to acknowledge something. Great job recognizing that the default thinking doesn't serve you in your life now. So the fact that you recognize, wow, I have this way of thinking that I don't want in my life, and I'm going to do something about it. So that's enormous, and it's amazing. Can you tell me, what does this default soundtrack sound like? What does it say to you?
So it says that, whenever I put myself first and don't put, other people first, I'm selfish. Or if I want to do something for myself, it's never going to succeed.
Now, did somebody tell you that?
Yes, my parents, actually.
Okay. All right. So thank you for like admitting that. And the reason why your parents told you that is because their parents probably told them that. And so they probably thought that they were protecting you. And instead, they sentenced you to a brain and a way of thinking that makes you feel terrible.
Right.
And so when you can recognize who the programming comes from, it also helps, because then you can separate yourself from that voice, because it's not your voice, it's your parents' voice. And you have a chance to break this chain. You have the chance to be the one that this playlist dies with. You have the chance to create a whole new way of thinking and talking to yourself. And that's incredible. And so the first thing that you said is that you have a belief because somebody programmed this into your mind that runs on default that putting yourself first is selfish. Correct?
Right.
How does that impact your life?
I get burnout, basically. Mm-hmm.
If you could program a different belief, what would the belief be?
That, worth it, basically. It's okay for me to take care of myself. It's okay for me to have emotions. It's okay for me to just be me. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Your whole life's about to change. Because not only is it okay, I deserve to feel how I feel.
Right.
Like the main mantra I want you to have is, I deserve to be happy. Does this make me happy? I deserve to feel happy. Does this make me happy? What would change in your life if you started to tell yourself over and over every single morning when you start your day, I deserve to be happy today? What would change if you believed that happiness was something you deserved?
Wow. I think that my day-to-day would be a lot better, basically. I would actually, get to cross off all the lists that I put down on my to-do list. I would have self-confidence. I would be able to go out and have a great day with friends. I noticed that I hold myself back a lot because of what's been programmed in my head. And I'm done with that,
Well, I'm glad you recognize it. That's a huge step. Most of us sleepwalk through life and don't even realize that we have been trained as little kids to make everybody around us happy, and that it's your job to make people happy. It's your job to keep people satisfied. It's your job to make sure nobody's disappointed with you. And part of the problem is that underneath what your story is, which is it's selfish to put myself first, you have an uglier story. And the uglier story, which I recognize because I had this one too, is people will be mad at me if I put myself first. There will be consequences if I do what's good for me. And so that's what you're really wrestling with, is that you've connected taking care of yourself with somebody pulling their love away.
Yes.
And that's why you're scared to put yourself first. This goes way deeper. And so you're doing fantastic on behalf of all of us by recognizing that your own thinking is holding yourself back. And I can tell you're just sick of it. And so here's what you have to start to do. Number one, I want you to name the voice.
Name it?
Yeah, give it a name. Sally, Sue, Jocko, Raul, Michael. We got to name this thing.
Oh boy. Vicky, I guess.
Vicky. Okay. So when this default programming comes up, you're going to talk back to Vicky. Okay?
Okay.
And literally, you can even physically, when you feel yourself holding yourself back, that's the signal that this is default programming. You're going to turn toward Vicky. Literally, I want you to turn your body, and you're going to look as if Vicky's there, and you're going to be like, shut up, Vicky.
Right.
Now I want to hear you do it.
Shut up, Vicky.
Yeah, but if you don't make your boss happy, nobody's going to love you. Tell her, shut up.
Shut up.
If you don't do exactly what your parents want, they're going to be disappointed.
Shut up.
Say it louder. I don't believe you.
Shut up.
Say her name.
Shut up, Vicky.
You don't want to believe this shit Vicky's saying, right?
Nope.
What do you want to believe?
In myself.
Yeah. Your parents want you to be happy. They don't know how to make you happy. So they're just telling you what their parents told them. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is what people do. You are now an adult. You're not to blame for the crap, the malarkey, the garbage, the gunk, the generational trauma shit that your parents put in your brain. You're responsible now that you're an adult for reprogramming this. And so whenever your mind tells you something that you don't want to think, shut up, Vicky. I don't believe that. I believe that if I'm happy, my parents are going to think they won the lottery. I don't believe that. I believe that if I put myself first, I'm going to do better work. Shut up, Vicky. What the hell? You're not paying my rent. Shut up, Vicky. You're not going to the party. I'm not taking you with you. There's no +1 on this invitation. Shut up, Vicky. Like by distancing yourself and talking back to it, it loses its power over you. And what also starts to happen is the filter in your brain, the RAS, it's now noticing, oh, you actually care about empowering yourself. And you're going to see more and more reasons to put yourself first. But it really does start with, you got to delete that song, Shut Up, Vicky, Shut Up, Vicky, Shut Up, Vicky, on the playlist in your mind from the past. And you've got to insert the new programming you want to run on default, which is, I deserve to be happy. My parents are proud of me for being me. Nobody's disappointed in me. And if they are, I'm an adult. I can freaking handle it. And I got to start taking care of myself because I deserve that. Those are your beliefs, period. And whenever you start to feel like, here you go, holding yourself back, shut up, Vicky. And you'll notice the more you do this and you take ownership for programming your mind, the less Vicky's going to show up.
Okay.
I mean it.
Right.
I really mean it. If you believed in yourself, what's one change you would make that would improve your life?
I would be less intense, I would say.
Why are you intense?
Because, well, just a little story for you. Like, I'm an immigrant, and so are my parents. And they are very tough on me. They're very toxic because of, culture. And they feel the need to raise me a certain way. But in terms of, living in America, what they're doing to me is very toxic and abusive. So I'm just like always living on the edge, basically.
Yeah.
And if I could just, embrace myself, I think I would be a more relaxed person.
Yes. So are you open to some coaching?
Yes.
So a couple things I want to say about this. I agree with you. And when you take on the job of programming your mind to work for you, you will be happier. You will relax. And the reason why you're intense is because you have been trained to believe that at any moment something could go wrong.
Right.
And that's your lived experience. That is real. That happened. And that is what happened during your childhood. And it will also help you if you can lose the word toxic. Like, unless your parents are abusing you, and I don't know that they are or they're not. But if you lose the word toxic and you amplify a little compassion and you say, I'm not saying what my parents are doing is right. I'm not saying that they didn't cause issues for me emotionally and mentally and psychologically, but they did the best that they could. And I bet it was kind of hard to immigrate here. And I bet it was hard to feel like an outsider. And I bet the stakes felt really high for them. And they felt like outsiders. And they felt like they couldn't mess up. And I bet they took all of that stress that was their lived experience, and out of fear and love, they aimed it at you.
Right.
And the reason why I want you to drop the word toxic is because I see this word thrown all over the internet. And it's a very divisive word, particularly if you want to improve your relationship with the people who are engaged in behavior that feels toxic. And so I think your parents probably did the best they could with their experiences in life and with the situation that they were in. And that if they truly understood what it was like for you as a child, they'd be mortified and horrified and they'd feel terrible. Is that a fair assessment?
I guess for some parts.
Okay. So I don't want to have you have to go in through your whole family history, but if there's, abuse and that kind of stuff, then yeah, that is toxic. And you do need boundaries, and you'll figure that out with your therapist. But when it comes to not adding more pressure on yourself, adding a little compassion so that it doesn't feel so personal, and accepting the fact that this was a form of like emotional abuse for you, that you stressed you the hell out. You have this toxic stress in your body. You feel on edge all the time. You can change this. And you can also change this and change the dynamic with your parents. And the way that you change the dynamics with your parents is by taking responsibility for how you show up for yourself. There's always kind of two people in a relationship. When you change, the energy that you bring into that relationship is going to change. And they're going to have no choice but to change in reaction to it. That's how this creates a major ripple effect, because it has held you hostage for far too long. And you have the chance to not only heal yourself, but to heal this pattern that's been passed down through your family.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
So for right now, we're not really on speaking terms. Yes, they have abused me physically, emotionally, mentally. It's bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So since you're not on speaking terms and you're seeking therapeutic help, let's first say this. I am proud of you for getting the help that you need. And I'm proud of you for drawing boundaries that put you first. And drawing boundaries that put you first is an example of you believing that you're worthy and that you deserve to be happy. And that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And when you continue to start to evict the bully that's in your head by naming that bully and talking back to that bully, you will start to hear and reclaim the most powerful voice on the planet, your own. Period. And you don't need to worry about your parents. The time will come, if it ever comes, when you will feel strong enough, confident enough, secure enough, and safe enough to reconnect with them if that's what you choose to do. And if you choose to never do that, that's okay too. Because you deserve to be happy. You do.
Okay.
What did you get from this conversation?
Basically, to have more compassion for others as well as myself.
Yes, because part of learning to accept yourself is being compassionate. Compassion for self is super important. You don't have to excuse what somebody did. But when you seek to kind of understand what was going on, both for yourself, for other people, when you bring compassion to it, that's where you open the door to true power for yourself and where you take control and responsibility for what happens in your life moving forward. You get to decide what happens next. And when you start to change the way that you speak to yourself, again, your whole mindset's going to change. And that will be what empowers you to create a new relationship, if that's what you decide to do in the future. But what you're doing right now is you're actually working on the most important relationship on the planet, and that's the one you have with yourself.
Right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Mel.
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
And thank you for telling me what you told me, because you actually saying, wait a minute, I can hear what you're saying, but there was physical abuse here, Mel. That's you putting yourself first. That's another example of how strong you are. Claim that stuff, baby.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you, Mel.
I love you too. You're awesome. And next up, you're going to hear from a fellow podcast listener who's been impacted by the negativity of narcissism. And she's sick of it. And we're going to talk about what steps she can take and what steps you can take too when we come back. Hey, it's Mel, and I wanted to jump into the middle of that podcast episode you were watching to make sure you knew about a free opportunity that I created for you. It's a new 3-part training called Take Control with Mel Robbins. It is packed with science. It is packed with action. It's exactly what you need right now. I know that you are tired of feeling like you're in survival mode. You're tired of merely coping, and it is time to tap back into your excellence and power again. Let me coach you. Let me guide you on the steps that you need to take in order to level up and start executing. It's going to feel so great to start winning again. All you got to do is click on the link right there in the caption. It's melrobbins.com/take control. It is free. It is for you. And you need to be in it. Now, let's go back to the podcast. Welcome back. I'm Mel Robbins, and today we're talking about a mindset reset, which is when you identify the default programming in your mind. You know, that critical voice that's constantly chirping away in the background. You're never good enough. You didn't get it right. You look fat. Once you identify that and that you're sick of it, how can you erase that bully and program a new positive soundtrack in its place? Well, Diane is about to help you do just that. Hi.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing all right, doing all right. Do have a question for you. I mean, wonderful information from Poppy. My question comes more of what about when this kind of programming and voices are from spouses, friends, employers, and they're just basically building on what your parents or other people have said?
Great question. So the question is, what if you've got programming from childhood that now is basically being reinforced by colleagues, bosses, spouses, friend group, blah, bitty, blah, bitty, blah.
Yes.
What is the kind of default negative thing that you say to yourself?
It's definitely not good enough. And who the heck do you think you are?
Ooh, the who the heck do you think you are? That has a real bite to it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it does. So, I don't know why I'm going to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you this. Were either of your parents on the narcissism personality disorder by chance? Spectrum?
Well, I'm pretty close. I would say yes, one of them for sure.
And the reason why I say that is because the who do you think you are has a very hostile nature to it. So I would imagine, and again, I'm just guessing here, that there was a level of either hostility or fighting or outbursts or eruptions that were very chaotic for you when you were a little kid happening with the adults in your house.
I've blocked out a lot. I remember more of my adulthood where my ex was a narcissist. I
Okay.
mean, definitely.
Yep. Okay. So I am not surprised that you blocked a lot of childhood out, because what happens is that when you're in a situation that is extremely stressful as a young kid, because the adults around you can't be trusted, or they're erratic, or whatever the situation may be, you live in a state of fight or flight, and the alarm system in your body's going off. And when you are on edge and the alarm system in your nervous system is going off because you don't feel safe around the adults in the house, it impairs the cognitive functioning in your brain. This comes from research out of UCLA. Dr. Judith Willis has studied extensively how nervous system dysregulation impacts the brain's ability to function. And so if you're busy managing this toxic stress in your body as a kid, your brain's not actually present to make memories. And so super normal to not have a lot of memories, by the way. I do not have a lot of memories from my childhood, from high school, from college, from law school, because I was in a constant state of anxiety. Never present in the room to make memories there. And what I want to tell you first is the good news. So the good news is, even though you have been the victim of being with a narcissist, and you have had a childhood that was fraught with all kinds of stuff, you can change your brain. You can learn how to calm your nervous system, and you can absolutely change the programming in your mind. And I want you to relate to the programming in your mind as if it was deliberately put there. Because even though a narcissist or somebody with a narcissistic personality is not deliberately doing this to you, they are so incapable of empathy, they're not even considering you and me. We're objects. They're just doing what they're doing. But we literally get damaged in the way that we think about ourselves when you're around somebody like that, because you think you're the problem. You think that if there was something different about you, then everything would be okay. And lots of people with a narcissistic personality issue, they actually tell you that you're the problem. And so this was a deliberate programming in your mind at the hands of other adults. Now, the good news is you're an adult and you can take deliberate steps to reprogram your mind. And I'm going straight for like boom in the face on this because I want you to realize that you got to get deliberate about this. That somebody else trained you to think this way. And it is a level of being deliberate. As if I said, you're going to move to Russia and you got to speak fluent Russian. I realize you've spoken, how old are you?
65.
You've spoken English for 65 years. But for the rest of your life, we're going to speak Russian. We're going to speak Swahili. We're going to speak a different language. And you can learn a different language. And learning to shut off the abusive voice in your head and teaching yourself through thought substitution a different language is what you're going to have to do. So that's number one. Number two, you're not going to overnight be able to look in the mirror like, I love myself. It doesn't work that way because you've had a lifetime of people telling you otherwise. And your brain will reject any mantra that you choose that you have actively tried to disprove. And so we got to pick something for you that you may not quite be there yet, but you believe in the truth of it. And what I believe that everybody deserves is, I think you can say, I deserve to be happy, or I'm a good person who's trying her best, and I deserve to be happy. I'm a kind person who deserves respect. I am doing the best I can, and that's good enough. Like there are these mantras that kick the narcissist, you're not good enough, who do you think you are thing out of your head. And you can say something back that's like, hey, I'm a kind person. I'm doing the best I can. And that's good enough. And that is enough of a rebuke. And it's believable enough, even when you're beaten down, that as you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it to yourself, because you're going to have to, you will start to believe it. And one final thing that I wanted to say to you is that, you know how you said that the programming started with my parents, and then it was an ex, and then it was colleagues, and then it was a boss, and it was this. That may be true, but we've also got to start to do the work of catching the filter in your brain. So yes, your boss may be an erratic douche who calls out the things that are negative or is always in a grouchy mood.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean anything about you. This is where your filter and the programming in your mind scans the world and reads your boss's crappy mood as having to do with you. Because the narcissists in your life made you feel like everything was your fault. For all you know, your boss's wife is having an affair. He's going through a tumultuous divorce. He's dealing with like some issue in his gut, and he has irritable bowel syndrome, which is why he's always grouchy. And he's a really sad sack guy who can't get his shit together because he has childhood trauma, none of which has to do with you. But your programming in your mind makes you think everything's your fault. And that's also the part of the work that you're going to need to do. You got to reprogram the words you say. Hey, I'm a kind person. I'm doing the best I can. That's good enough. Or I deserve to be happy, especially after these assholes that were in my life. You can put a little sauce in there. Like, you know, you can tell I like a little spicy mantra, like something that, you know, because if you don't quite believe it, if it doesn't like loosen you up a little bit, that's not the right thing to say. Because most mantras are bullshit because people pick things like, I love myself. And then they spend the day going, you look like shit. You screwed that. Like, no, you don't love yourself. I need to give myself a break. I'm doing the best I can. Now, there's a mantra I can get behind because I believe that. And so pick something believable, put a little edge or fun into it because it shakes the mood down a little bit. And then go to work on this filter that you have of making everything is your fault because it's freaking not. Your stupid parents and your dumb ex-husband, all of whom were mentally challenged with narcissistic personalities, made you think that horseshit. You're not to blame for that, but you have a responsibility to change the way you talk to yourself and to basically go, not everything's about me. Thank God. I love that you're laughing now. You seem lighter. What did you get out of this?
I love the one thing, it's not everything's about me, period. It's not mine, not always, not all of it, you know, and really retraining the brain, really working through catching those filters, you know, and it's going to have to be one step at a time.
That's it. And here's the thing, give yourself a fucking break. Seriously. Give yourself a break. Like, have a little bit of compassion for, wow, I got out of a marriage with a raging narcissist. I'm pretty awesome.
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Give yourself more credit. And, you know, it is true. Like, we get so focused on our own bullshit that we convince ourselves that the world's problems are our doing. Most people have so much stuff going on and are so busy beating themselves up, they're not even thinking about you and me.
Yep. All right.
You
New
got
mantra.
this. You got this. Let me hear you say your new mantra.
Well, quit taking myself so seriously. I'm not getting out of this thing alive.
That's true. This ends the same. And how about adding, I might as well enjoy the rest of the ride.
There we go. I may as well enjoy the rest of the ride.
The first 65 kicked my ass. So let's have some fun the next 65.
And they did. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, but you're here laughing about it. That's more than most can say. And so I do believe the best days of your life are on the road ahead. I believe that.
Thank you. I'm believing it too. I'm getting there.
Awesome. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.